Anakin Skywalker felt the weight of 100 star systems on his shoulders as he walked through the towering doors of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The midday sun reflecting off the golden spires and casting bright patterns across the immaculate floors. The hush of the great hallway seemed to amplify the beat of his heart. He took a measured breath, trying to steady the swirl of conflicting emotions within him. He was determined, anxious, hopeful, and afraid all at once. Though a formal summons from the Jedi Council was not entirely unusual for him, everything about this particular meeting carried a magnitude he could not ignore. The Council had caught wind of his visions, and the gravity of these revelations would either validate his anxieties or set him up for gentle dismissal. Anakin had always believed his dreams had meaning. As a boy on Tatooine, he dreamt of freeing slaves, of traveling the galaxy, of becoming a Jedi Knight. Even those innocent, childish imaginings had turned into something real once Qui-Gon Jinn discovered him. Now the visions were darker, fueled by cryptic sensations in the Force. Padme, in anguish, crying out, her life slipping away while he stood helpless. Night after night, these images flashed before his eyes, always the same. The details were hazy, but the overwhelming sense of dread was unmistakable. He had confided in Obi-Wan, who had advised him to find calmness through meditation. He had hinted that the Council might need to be informed if these visions persisted. After all, they were not merely nightmares. Anakin's connection to the Force was strong, possibly stronger than any other Jedi alive. Visions that troubled him could very well be premonitions of events that might endanger the Republic or those he loved. This time, the Council listened with a curious openness. Yoda had paused in their last meeting, eyes half-lidded with contemplation, as though sensing that the fate of many might hinge upon what they decided next. So they summoned Anakin in earnest. The turbolift rose to the highest spire of the temple, arriving at the circular room where the Masters often convened. The doors hissed open. Anakin emerged to see Mace Windu, Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Cici Tyan, and a few others seated in a ring around the chamber. Obi-Wan stood slightly off to the side, arms folded, his gaze quietly supportive. A sense of formality enveloped the scene, but there was something else there, an undercurrent of readiness. Instead of reading immediate disapproval, Anakin sensed real concern emanating from the Masters. "Step forward, Skywalker," Mace Windu said. His deep voice echoed across the polished floor. "We have heard of your visions. We want to understand them better." Anakin inclined his head respectfully and moved to stand in the center of the room. His eyes darted briefly around to meet each Master's gaze. He wished he had the composure of Obi-Wan, who seemed so at ease in these hallowed walls. But Anakin's heart still pounded. He cleared his throat and began. "For many weeks, I have been dreaming visions in the Force. I see someone close to me, suffering. It's Padme." He paused, catching the flicker of recognition in the Master's eyes. Everyone knew of Senator Amidala and her tireless efforts to fight corruption in the Senate, though few in the Council were aware of the depth of Anakin's personal attachment to her. "She appears to be dying. It feels like it's happening in childbirth, but I can't be certain. All I see is pain and darkness. I can't help but feel it's a warning." Ki-Adi-Mundi stroked his chin. Premonitions of the future can be inaccurate or misleading if interpreted from a place of fear. Yoda narrowed his eyes and spoke in a measured tone. "Yes, but strong, young Skywalker's connection to the Force is, clear is the threat. Sense more than a mere dream, I do." Anakin held his breath. He had expected a cautionary lecture, but Yoda's words were something else, an admission that he, too, felt the significance of this vision. Obi-Wan stepped forward. "Anakin has experienced true premonitions before. His instincts saved countless lives on missions throughout the Clone Wars. I believe we should treat these visions with respect." Mace Windu, arms resting on the sides of his chair, leaned in. "We are at war. The Sith are not yet eradicated. Dooku's death removed one threat, but darkness still lingers, perhaps even here on Coruscant. We must not dismiss this possibility." Anakin's chest tightened at the mention of the Sith. It brought to mind that earlier conversation with Palpatine, talk of power, of life and death. There was a stirring in his memory of some half-veiled story the Chancellor had told him about a dark lord of the Sith who supposedly found ways to manipulate life itself. He had called him Plagueis. Anakin had not fully grasped its significance. But now, if these visions truly were about Padmé's life, perhaps that power was exactly what he needed to explore. But to mention it here to the Council felt dangerous. Yoda tapped his claw against the seat. Search your feelings carefully, you must. Any attachments that cloud your judgment, examine them. If fear you harbor, fear will feed the dark side. Anakin forced himself to stand a bit straighter. I understand, Master Yoda, but if these visions show a future event, should we not try to prevent it? Mace Windu exchanged glances with the others. Yes, but the question is how. Anakin, do you have any clue as to when or where this might happen? He shook his head. No, Master Windu. The visions are incomplete. It seems like it might be soon, but I can't say exactly. Plo Koon's mask concealed any expression he might have, but his voice was calm. We should proceed carefully. The Force can show possible futures, but to intervene based solely on fear could itself create the reality we wish to avoid. A tension-filled silence hung in the chamber. Anakin understood the Council's hesitation. The Jedi way taught them to remain detached and rely on the will of the Force. But he could not simply ignore what he had seen. He knew he loved Padmé. He could not deny that. The vision felt so real, so devastating, that to dismiss it would be an act of cruelty he could not bear. And yet, the Council was not chastising him for having attachments. They were not dismissing him at all. They seemed genuinely concerned. Finally, Mace Windu spoke again. We will meditate on these revelations together. In the meantime, remain vigilant. If you sense anything more, let us know. We will also place watchers around Senator Amidala for her own protection, covertly, of course. The galaxy believes we are the keepers of peace, so let us keep the peace for her and for others. Anakin felt a wave of relief crash over him. They were taking him seriously. No scolding about his undue attachment. No denial of the possibility that this was a true warning. They had concerns, yes, but they were allowing him to be part of the solution, not the problem. After the meeting, Obi-Wan caught him in the hallway. You did well, Anakin. Trust them. The Council is not blind to your abilities. Anakin nodded, a sudden welling of hope in his chest. If the Jedi Council was committed to helping him avert tragedy, then perhaps there was a chance to save Padmé from whatever horrifying fate the visions foretold. He returned to Padmé's apartment that evening, full of a new determination. She greeted him warmly, though her concern etched faint lines into her face. She was a few months pregnant, glowing with that special radiance he had heard about from others but never truly understood until now. He embraced her, inhaling the sweet fragrance of her hair. To him, she was luminous. Is everything all right? She asked, her eyes searching his. You seemed preoccupied at the temple. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to distress her. I spoke to the Council. They're taking measures to ensure your safety, Padmé. I told them about the nightmares. Her brow furrowed. Nightmares about me? He sighed and took her hands in his. I'm worried. I've seen glimpses of you in pain. Maybe something to do with the baby. But the Council is supportive. They'll keep a close watch on you. And I'll do everything I can to protect you. She pressed her lips together, seeing the resolve in his eyes. I'm not one to ignore the dangers of our galaxy, Anakin, but I won't let fear dictate my life. If the Jedi want to protect me, I'll accept it. I just don't want you to bear this burden alone. He held her gaze, feeling every pulse of the Force urging him to guard this life, this love that was now at the center of everything he fought for. We'll face it together, he whispered, then placed a gentle hand on her belly, sensing the flicker of life growing there. The following weeks were a flurry of strategy and watchfulness. The Council arranged for discreet security details for Padmé under the guise of standard Senate protection, ensuring she was always accompanied by at least one Jedi who blended in with her existing aides. Anakin, whenever his duties on the front lines of the Clone Wars permitted, remained on Coruscant. He spent hours in the temple, meditating with the Council, focusing on the vision in an attempt to glean more details. Sometimes Obi-Wan joined him, sometimes Yoda, sometimes only he sat in the stillness, trying to draw from the Force any clarity about the path leading to Padmé's potential doom. In these meditations, images flickered, dark corridors, cries of anguish, a swirl of cloaks, an overwhelming wave of sorrow. A persistent sense of betrayal and confusion haunted the edges of his consciousness. The Force showed him glimpses of robed figures, too murky to identify, and a sense of massive upheaval roiling across Coruscant, as though something was about to tip the delicate balance of the entire Republic. Yoda's voice filled the meditation chamber at one point, soft yet resonant with solemnity. A nexus of shifting futures, the Republic is. Chaos in the Senate. War raging. Powerful in the dark side. Some presence remains. Anakin forced himself to remain calm, but the mention of the dark side set his nerves alight. He recalled the conversation he had with Chancellor Palpatine a few days prior, yet another talk about the nature of power. Palpatine had a subtle way of probing Anakin's deepest concerns. He had told Anakin about Plagueis, a legendary Sith who allegedly possessed the ability to cheat death. Anakin had not shared this with the Council, uncertain of their reaction. Still, his mind drifted there. If there was a chance that knowledge of Plagueis' secrets could save Padmé, part of him wanted to learn more. But the memory of the last words Master Yoda had spoken earlier lingered in his mind. Careful you must be. Down a dark path, fear leads. Nonetheless, Anakin felt that if the Council was truly on his side, maybe he could share everything with them at some point. For now, he only mentioned that the Chancellor was aware of his concerns and had offered comfort. The Council seemed cautious but not overly alarmed. Palpatine had always been a friend to the Jedi, after all, or so they believed. Days turned into weeks. The Clone Wars raged on multiple fronts. Anakin and Obi-Wan were called away occasionally to lead battles. Each time Anakin was torn between duty to the Republic and worry for Padmé. Yet, with the Council's blessing, he arranged to be posted nearer to Coruscant whenever possible, trusting Obi-Wan and other generals to handle distant conflicts if necessary. One late evening, as the city planet's neon lights shimmered across the horizon, Anakin found himself alone in one of the temple's private meditation rooms. Tired from a recent skirmish on the Outer Rim, his body ached, but his mind refused to rest. He sank onto a cushion and tried to let the Force flow through him. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "You are troubled, my friend." Anakin opened his eyes to see Master Mace Windu standing in the doorway, arms folded, gaze steady. Anakin bowed his head respectfully. "Master Windu, I didn't hear you come in." Mace stepped into the room and sat across from him. "I could sense your unease from the corridor. This war weighs heavily on all of us. Your visions, no doubt, weigh even more." Anakin exhaled slowly, feeling a small surge of relief at the genuine concern he sensed from the usually stern master. "I can't shake the feeling that I'm not seeing the complete picture. Every time I think I'm close, the vision shifts." Mace regarded him thoughtfully. "Premonitions are a tangle. Sometimes you influence them just by observing them. The Force is not always direct." Anakin nodded. "Still, I fear for Padmé's life, and for my child. Part of me wonders if there's something more, some power beyond what we traditionally learn in the Jedi arts that could help." Mace's gaze narrowed slightly. "You speak of unnatural powers?" Anakin hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, there are legends of the Sith manipulating life and death. I have heard rumors." Mace's eyes flickered, but he did not immediately chastise Anakin for even suggesting Sith lore might be of interest. Instead, he took a measured breath. If the Sith had such power, it would come at a terrible cost. The dark side never grants gifts without exacting a heavy price in return. You must remember this. Anakin fought the urge to press further but saw the gravity in Mace's gaze. "I know the danger of the dark side, Master." Mace placed a reassuring hand on Anakin's shoulder. "I sense your sincerity. Keep your focus on the living force. If you remain true to its guidance, you will see the right path. And know that we are all here to help you, Anakin. This is not your burden alone. Anakin felt a wave of gratitude. For years, he had felt misunderstood in the Order. His talents and unorthodox methods often drew suspicion. But here was Mace Windu, offering trust and empathy. It was a moment of profound connection, one that eased the storm in Anakin's heart. In the following days, Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan convened with Anakin regularly, analyzing each new flicker of his visions, cross-referencing them with intelligence about potential threats to Padme. Senators loyal to her cause were quietly questioned to see if they had any knowledge of plots against her. The temple archives were searched for references to mysterious force powers that might entangle an unborn child's fate. Though they found little in the official records, Jocasta Nu, the temple librarian, hinted that not all knowledge of the Force was contained in the accessible archives. Some texts, particularly those regarding the dark side, were restricted or lost. Nevertheless, the Council persisted. They encouraged Anakin to remain close to Padme. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan found his own perspective shifting. He saw how the Council's openness soothed Anakin's restlessness. Instead of secrecy and guilt over his attachment, Anakin now functioned with a sense of the Order's support. At times, Obi-Wan worried about what would happen if the Council learned the full truth of Anakin and Padme's marriage. But Mace and Yoda had both subtly communicated that protecting the future mother of Anakin's child might indeed be critical to the fate of the Jedi. Perhaps the Chosen One's child would also play a vital role someday. The prophecy was never completely clear, but the balance of the Force might hinge on this lineage. Weeks later, a faint lead emerged. Intelligence suggested a covert plan by a radical faction in the Separatist Council aimed at striking key senators on Coruscant. Although they had no direct evidence that Padme was the prime target, her strong anti-war stance made her a likely candidate. The Council escalated protective measures. By this time, Padme's pregnancy was visible enough that her staff arranged for less travel, keeping her safely in her apartment or the Senate building. One evening, after a long Senate session, Padme returned to her apartment with Anakin quietly at her side, along with two plainclothes temple knights who followed at a respectful distance. As they entered the softly lit living area, Padme sank onto the couch with a weary sigh. Anakin sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know this must feel constricting, but the threat is real." Padme's eyes warmed. "You have nothing to apologize for. If this is what it takes for me to stay safe for our child, I can endure the caution." And the Council has been surprisingly discreet. Her gaze flicked to the shadows of the corners, aware the Jedi Knights had given them space for this private conversation. "Anakin, do you still have the visions?" He nodded, tension creeping into his jaw. "They haven't stopped, but I do feel more prepared. The Council is working with me to uncover the meaning. I don't feel alone anymore." She squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, and I trust the Jedi." He felt his heart clench with love for her in that moment. He leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We'll get through this. I promise." A few hours later, the night was quiet until the early hours of the morning, when Anakin's comm beeped. He stirred awake, blinking in the darkness, to see Obi-Wan's hollow image shimmering a few feet away. The lines on Obi-Wan's face were tense, his voice urgent. "Anakin, there's been a security breach in the Senate Tower. We've intercepted some coded transmissions. They mention Senator Amidala's name and an imminent attack." Anakin shot upright, fully alert. "When?" "Soon, possibly tonight. The Council wants you to secure Padme immediately and prepare to move if necessary." Anakin ended the transmission and hurried to Padme's side. The night was thick with tension as he called the security detail. Within minutes, half a dozen Jedi and Senate guards were in the apartment, scanning for explosive devices or infiltration. The entire floor was locked down. Padme, startled but resolute, demanded to stay put until they had more information. But Anakin convinced her that the temple might be safer if the threat was as grave as the intelligence suggested. They moved swiftly, traveling in a nondescript speeder with tinted windows, escorted by Jedi Knights on unobtrusive swoop bikes. The city lights of Coruscant rushed past them. Anakin felt a tightening in his chest as the Force prickled with warnings. Something was gathering in the shadows, a swirl of negativity that felt like a predator about to pounce. Upon arrival at the temple, Yoda himself was waiting at the entrance, flanked by Mace and Obi-Wan. They ushered Padme into a secure corridor lined with tall columns and moved her swiftly to a private chamber deeper inside. Yoda's ears drooped slightly, betraying his concern. "Troubled, the Force is," he murmured. "Surrounded by swirling possibilities. We are." Mace turned to Obi-Wan. "We must track down the source of these transmissions. Now." Obi-Wan nodded, heading off with a group of knights. Meanwhile, Anakin stayed by Padme's side, listening as the temple staff prepared living quarters for her. She seemed calm, but only on the surface. She was a seasoned politician who could handle danger, yet the threat to her unborn child weighed on her. Anakin placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then the temple shook. The lights flickered. A tremor ran through the Force like a sonic blast. Alarms began blaring, echoing down the corridors. Anakin's mind raced. An attack on the temple itself? He and the other Jedi ignited their lightsabers, the bright hum cutting through the confusion. A moment later, the security feed displayed a cluster of small but powerful explosive devices detonating outside one of the spires. The glancing blow rocked the structure but did not breach it fully. Yet it was enough to send waves of panic across the district. The Jedi responded quickly, some leaping onto gunships to secure the perimeter, others scanning for more threats inside. Anakin guided Padme deeper into the temple, heart pounding. If this was truly an assassination attempt orchestrated by the Separatists or some unseen hand, it was brazen beyond belief. The Jedi Temple was one of the most fortified places in the galaxy. Yet someone had placed explosives close enough to rattle them. Moments later, Obi-Wan's voice crackled over the comm. "We've found the transmission's origin. They came from inside the temple. There's a traitor within our ranks or someone deeply embedded in our systems." Mace's voice seethed with controlled fury. "Contain every entrance. We can't allow them to escape." A wave of betrayal and anger rippled through Anakin. The infiltration of the temple felt like a personal violation. He had spent more than half his life here, training, forging bonds, believing in the sanctity of these halls. Now, the enemy was not just outside but within. Yet in that swirl of chaos, Anakin caught a flicker of the Force, almost a whisper, urging him to focus. He closed his eyes and breathed, recalling the lessons the Council had emphasized for weeks. Fear leads to haste, which leads to the dark side. He forced himself to open his senses, searching for a presence in the Force that did not belong. Down a corridor lit only by emergency lights, he sensed a swirl of malevolent intent. He motioned 2 Jedi Knights to follow. "Guard Padme," he told them. "I need to check something." He followed the sensation, heart thudding. The deeper he went, the stronger the impression became. At last, rounding a corner near a seldom-used storeroom, he glimpsed a cloaked figure manipulating a terminal. The figure turned, revealing a face contorted by panic and hate. Before Anakin could speak, the figure opened fire with a blaster. Anakin deflected the bolts easily, the brilliant glow of his lightsaber illuminating the corridor with each movement. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure snarled but offered no name. Instead, in a desperate bid, he hurled a detonator at Anakin. With a reflex honed by war, Anakin used the Force to fling it back, sending the figure scrambling for cover. The explosion rocked the storage area, blasting open containers and sending smoke billowing. Anakin lunged forward, using the momentum of the blast to close the distance. He disarmed the figure, knocking him to the ground. Security squads arrived just in time to secure the scene. Removing the cloak, they revealed a human male with a twisted scowl, wearing partial Jedi attire but lacking any sign of an official rank. A spy, planted or turned. He spat curses about the Jedi's hypocrisy, claiming that the Republic was doomed. Mace and Obi-Wan arrived, surveying the captive. They questioned him relentlessly. Obi-Wan's voice was gentle but firm as he attempted to pry out the identity of whoever orchestrated the infiltration. Mace's presence loomed, radiating controlled anger. But the captive only chuckled bitterly and spoke in cryptic phrases about the inevitability of the Republic's collapse and how the Dark Lord has already won. Hours passed. The temple security systems were purged, the infiltration cell discovered and apprehended. Some had managed to slip away in the chaos, but the council had enough to piece together a worrying puzzle. This infiltration was not just a random separatist plot. It appeared designed to strike at the temple from within, sowing confusion and fear, perhaps as a precursor to something larger. If the traitors had succeeded fully, they might have compromised Jedi intelligence on a grand scale or even aimed to abduct Padme. In the aftermath, Padme remained in the temple under close guard. The council convened in a rare nighttime session, the gloom of Coruscant's horizon visible through the tall windows. Their anxiety was palpable. Someone was pulling the strings, orchestrating events to weaken both the Jedi and the Senate. This infiltration shows cunning, resources, and knowledge of our temple layout. We must remain vigilant, Mace declared. Yoda nodded, eyes heavy-lidded. A bigger threat, this suggests. Hidden in the shadows, someone is. Anakin spoke up, voice careful but resolute. Master, do you think this could be the work of a Sith Lord still alive, even after Dooku's death? We know from years past that the Sith have a way of operating unseen. Obi-Wan exchanged a troubled glance with Mace. Darth Sidious was mentioned by Count Dooku before, but we've never had solid evidence of his true identity. Kadi-Mundi frowned. And let us not forget that the Chancellor has grown increasingly powerful. But we have no proof he's anything but a supporter of the Jedi. Silence followed, the question of Palpatine's role hovering in the background. Anakin felt a spike of unease. The memory of Palpatine's stories about Plagueis, about the power to cheat death, gnawed at him. Could Palpatine be that hidden force in the shadows? Or was he just a friend offering esoteric knowledge? The council had warned him about the lure of easy solutions. Yet the fear for Padme's life still whispered at the edges of his mind. Ultimately, the council resolved to further investigate the possibility of a remaining Sith threat in the highest echelons of the Republic. They would do so quietly, mindful that public mistrust of the Jedi was already simmering due to war fatigue. With Padme in the temple, they felt confident she was safer than ever. In the days that followed, the council expanded its meditation sessions, seeking glimpses of the shadowy puppet master. Anakin joined them, sinking deeper into the Force than he ever had before. Visions swirled. A galaxy in flames, lightsaber duels in darkened corridors, a monstrous mechanical breathing echoing in the distance. He saw flashes of Padme crying, Obi-Wan shouting. The swirl coalesced into a final image. A silhouette wreathed in darkness, standing in front of him, speaking words he could not hear, but which resonated with a promise of life and death. He emerged from the vision breathless. Yoda was at his side, eyes closed, brow furrowed. Mace too seemed shaken. Obi-Wan placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder. I saw it too, Obi-Wan murmured, voice hoarse. Darkness like I've never felt. The Force itself trembled. Yoda opened his eyes, ears flattened. The path forward, clouded it remains. Yet certain it is that a powerful darkness still looms. Mace exhaled. We must be prepared for the worst. Our enemy wields a cunning and power that could shake the foundation of the Republic itself. A new tension set in among the Jedi. Patrols around the temple increased. Anakin barely left Padme's side unless absolutely necessary. Padme, for her part, did her best to remain calm, directing some of her senatorial work from a secure comm station the Jedi provided. She also had an array of medical droids at her disposal, ensuring her pregnancy progressed healthily despite the stress. During this time, Palpatine made an unannounced visit to the temple, flanked by his red-robed guards. It was an unprecedented gesture. Chancellors rarely came to the Jedi Temple, preferring to summon the Jedi to the Senate. But Palpatine insisted on personally checking on Senator Amidala's well-being. Mace Windu and Obi-Wan greeted him in the main hall, while Anakin waited in the shadows, tension humming in his veins. Palpatine wore a concerned expression, hands clasped before him. "Masters, I've heard disturbing rumors of an attack on the temple. I came to offer my support," he said, voice laden with concern. "Is the senator safe?" Mace gave a slight bow. "She is safe, Chancellor. The attackers have been neutralized." Palpatine's gaze swept the interior. "I'm relieved to hear it. Our dear Padme is vital to the Republic's future. Now more than ever, the Senate needs unwavering voices." He paused, then turned to Obi-Wan. "And how is our hero Anakin Skywalker? I understand he's been deeply troubled by certain visions." Obi-Wan nodded politely. "He's currently on duty, Chancellor. The Council has the situation in hand." Palpatine's eyes flickered, scanning the area until he spotted Anakin at a distance. A subtle half-smile curled his lips. "Ah, there he is." He moved gracefully toward Anakin, leaving Mace and Obi-Wan to follow. "My boy, I'm so glad to see you. The galaxy owes you a debt for all you've done, and you're about to become a father as well." "How wonderful." Anakin inclined his head, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for your concern, Chancellor. We have it under control." Palpatine chuckled softly, placing a hand on Anakin's shoulder in a grandfatherly manner. "I know you do, Anakin, but if there's anything I can offer, any resources, any knowledge, do not hesitate to ask. We live in a perilous time, and the Jedi Order is our greatest shield against the dark." Mace's posture remained tense as he joined them. "We appreciate your concern, Chancellor. However, the temple security is our domain." Palpatine gave a slight nod, though his demeanor exuded quiet confidence. "Of course, Master Windu, I trust you to keep our beloved senator safe. Though I do recall you were quite close to capturing General Grievous recently. Perhaps if the war were concluded sooner, these infiltration attempts would be thwarted." Obi-Wan cleared his throat. "We are working on that, Chancellor. General Grievous remains elusive, but we have leads." Palpatine gave a genteel smile. "Well, I won't keep you from your duties. Do convey my regards to Senator Amidala. I look forward to seeing her back in the Senate soon." With that, he swept out, his guards in tow. Anakin watched him leave, a tumult of thoughts swirling in his mind. Palpatine's kindly demeanor felt genuine on the surface, yet Anakin couldn't shake the sense that underneath it lay an immense well of secrets. The ghostly memory of Plagueis' story floated in the back of his mind, tempting him with the possibility that Palpatine might still hold the key to saving Padme. That evening, Anakin and Obi-Wan stood on a temple balcony overlooking the shimmering skyline. The wind ruffled their cloaks, carrying the faint hum of speeders far below. Obi-Wan spoke softly, a note of worry in his voice. "I saw how the Chancellor spoke to you. He's always taken a special interest in you, Anakin. Be wary. He might not be what he appears." Anakin let out a slow breath. "I sense something about him, too, but I can't say for sure if it's malicious." Obi-Wan turned to face him, gray-blue eyes scanning Anakin's face. "Just remember, we're here to help you. The Council is doing everything they can, with your best interests at heart." Anakin nodded, looking out at the sea of lights. "I know. It's just, these visions won't let go of me, Obi-Wan. They keep showing Padme dying. I feel like each day we don't find the cause, we're one step closer to making it real." Obi-Wan placed a firm hand on Anakin's shoulder. "We will uncover the threat. If the Sith are involved, we'll expose them. The Council has never been more united." Anakin smiled faintly, appreciating Obi-Wan's support. He recalled the days of his youth, the friction between him and the Council, the feeling that they were always at odds. Now, the Council was indeed united around him. A drastic shift that made him feel both grateful and slightly uneasy. Grateful because he was not alone. Uneasy because the stakes were so high that the entire Jedi Order was mobilizing around the possibility of a hidden enemy. In the subsequent weeks, small pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Intelligence discovered that several high-ranking officials in the Senate, not necessarily separatists, had begun to form alliances with unseen benefactors. A pattern of suspicious wealth transfers and communications was traced back to various shell corporations. The council suspected that a central figure, someone with deep knowledge of the Republic's bureaucracy, was orchestrating these manipulations, fueling the war and sowing distrust in the Jedi. Meanwhile, the medical droids attending Padme reported encouraging news. Despite the stress, her pregnancy was progressing well. She was healthy, the baby was thriving. Yet the visions continued to plague Anakin, always showing a catastrophic moment near childbirth. Padme's eyes, for all their calm, seemed haunted at times, as though she, too, felt the inevitability of something. But she stood firm, determined not to let fear rule her actions. One afternoon, Palpatine requested a private meeting with Anakin. Initially, Anakin felt reluctant, but the council urged him to comply, carefully. Mace, in particular, wanted to see if any clues might emerge from Palpatine's words. So Anakin found himself in the Chancellor's private office, with the setting sun casting long shadows over the opulent decor. Palpatine stood near a grand window that overlooked the cityscape, hands folded serenely. "Come in, Anakin," he said, voice kind. "I hope you're well. I wanted to speak to you about certain matters beyond the war." Anakin stepped forward, guarded but curious. "What matters, Chancellor?" Palpatine turned, his eyes reflecting the dying light. "I know you've been worried about Senator Amidala. The entire galaxy is aware of how close you two have become, even if the specifics are rumored rather than confirmed. And I also know how deeply you fear losing her. Don't deny it." Anakin exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the admission. "I can't. She means everything to me." Palpatine nodded sympathetically. "Of course she does. I have watched over you since you were a boy, Anakin. I know how devotion shapes your heart. The Jedi Code, however, forbids attachments. But is that truly wise in your case?" Anakin tensed, glancing away. He was aware of the precarious balance the council had struck in this matter, their acceptance of his concern for Padme. "The council understands the importance of my visions. They're helping me." Palpatine's voice softened. "Ah, but are they helping you enough? There are powers, advanced teachings in the Force that can preserve life, Anakin. Did you know that? The tales of Plagueis, the wise, are not just bedtime stories." Anakin felt his stomach tighten. "I have heard fragments, but that's Sith lore, forbidden." Palpatine's gaze was piercing now. "Is it better to let Padme die than to explore every option? If you had the power to save her, wouldn't you grasp it?" A swirl of conflict churned in Anakin's chest. The council's unwavering support had eased some of his fears, but hearing Palpatine's words again reawakened the desperate hunger for a surefire solution. I don't want to lose her." A reassuring smile curved Palpatine's lips. "I'm not suggesting you do anything rash, but knowledge of the Force is limitless. The Jedi's teachings, while noble, are only a fraction of what's possible. If Padme's life is in peril, can you really afford to ignore other avenues?" Anakin took a steadying breath. Part of him wanted to run from the conversation, to tell Palpatine that he trusted the council. But another part, the desperate, fearful part, latched onto the possibility of saving her no matter what. "I appreciate your concern," Anakin managed, voice hoarse, "but I must trust the Jedi. I'll keep your words in mind." Palpatine inclined his head graciously. "Of course, I only wish to see you happy, Anakin, to see the galaxy at peace, and those we care for safe." Anakin left the meeting more unsettled than ever. The Chancellor had not revealed outright that he was a Sith, nor had he directly tried to turn Anakin. But the subtext was undeniable. Knowledge of Plagueis' power lingered, and Palpatine seemed eager to point Anakin toward it. The question hammered in Anakin's mind. Should he reveal this entire conversation to the Council? If he did, they would immediately suspect Palpatine, possibly leading to a dangerous confrontation. If he kept silent, he risked enabling Palpatine's shadowy manipulations. After hours of contemplation, he confided in Obi-Wan, reciting much of the exchange without exaggeration. Obi-Wan's expression grew grim. "We must tell the Council. This is the clearest sign yet that Palpatine may be harboring knowledge of the Sith. Anakin hesitated. Yes, but if he's not, then we risk alienating the Supreme Chancellor in the midst of a war. And if he is, we need proof. Obi-Wan placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder. We have to be careful, but we can't ignore this. We'll speak to Master Windu and Master Yoda. So they did. Late that night, in a private council session with only Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan present, Anakin recounted his conversation with Palpatine. A heavy silence descended afterward. Mace exhaled slowly, fingers drumming on the armrest. This is more than suspicion. The Chancellor's knowledge of Sith lore is highly specific. We can't dismiss the possibility that he is connected to the Sith lineage we've been tracking. Yoda's eyes darkened with worry. Watched him for some time, we have. Shrouded in the Force, he is. More so than any ordinary politician should be. Obi-Wan steeled himself. What do we do now? Mace's gaze snapped to Anakin. We must move carefully. If Palpatine is indeed a Sith Lord, confronting him prematurely could lead to disaster. We need to uncover proof and ensure the Senate stands with us. Otherwise, the Jedi could be branded as traitors if we act against the Chancellor with no evidence. Anakin felt a pang of relief that the Council was not dismissing him or scolding him for his conversation with Palpatine. They were seeing it for the threat it might be. Yet dread coiled in his gut. If Palpatine truly was the Sith Master, how far would he go to secure victory? Anakin pictured the entire Republic at risk, the clones, the billions of lives, and in the midst of it, Padme with a target on her back. Yoda's ears perked slightly. A plan we must form. Observe him further, we will. Ready ourselves for betrayal, but not act in haste. Mace nodded, then regarded Anakin with unusual softness in his eyes. Thank you for confiding in us, Anakin. We know how close you and the Chancellor have been. That couldn't have been easy. Anakin bowed his head. I trust you, Masters. Over the next few days, subtle surveillance was placed on Palpatine's office by Jedi infiltration teams. Officially, they were searching for more infiltration cells, seeking to secure the Republic's leadership. Unofficially, they were watching for any sign of Palpatine's connection to the Sith. The Chancellor, for his part, maintained his usual routine: Senate meetings, war councils, philanthropic appearances. If he suspected the Jedi were monitoring him, he gave no sign. Meanwhile, Padme remained under watch in the temple, continuing her Senate duties via holo. Rumors ran rampant in the corridors of power, that she was ill or that the Jedi had seized her. Speculation and gossip fueled distrust among certain senators, some even calling for investigations into Jedi overreach. The war, combined with these political, Anakin's visions intensified. He found fleeting clarity during meditation, glimpses of Padme giving birth, screaming out for help. Sometimes, in these flashes, he stood at her side, powerless. Other times, he was absent, battling some monstrous presence. The sense of inevitability pressed on him. But with each passing day that she remained healthy within the temple, part of him hoped the vision might be thwarted. Perhaps the future was indeed changing. Perhaps the support of the Council and the vigilance of the Jedi was enough. Then, late one evening, everything shifted. Alarms shrieked through the temple again. This time, though, the threat did not come in the form of bombs or infiltration. It came from the Senate. A wave of shock and dismay rippled through the city. News broke that General Grievous had launched a massive surprise attack on Coruscant, leading a separatist fleet brazenly close to the capital's atmosphere. The planet's defense fleet scrambled, but many were away at the front lines. The temple's spires glowed red from distant cannon fire in the night sky. Chaos reigned in the Senate district. The Chancellor declared a state of emergency, urging the Jedi to repel the invasion. But communications were patchy, and intelligence was contradictory. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and a host of other Jedi leapt into gunships, leading squadrons of clone troopers to intercept Grievous droid forces. The cityscape became a war zone of laser fire and crumbling durasteel towers. Padme, still in the temple, trembled with concern. Yoda and Mace strove to coordinate temple defenses and aid the clones, all while keeping an eye on the Chancellor's moves. In the midst of the onslaught, something strange occurred. Palpatine refused to evacuate with the Senate. He insisted on staying in his office, claiming he needed to direct the war effort personally. Obi-Wan and Anakin managed to land on a separatist command ship after a daring chase. Their mission was to eliminate the main droid control node and force a retreat. But even as they dueled Grievous Magna Guards in the labyrinthine corridors, Obi-Wan felt a disturbance in the Force. He exchanged a startled look with Anakin. Something was happening on Coruscant, something more sinister than the mere invasion. Back at the temple, Mace's comm flashed with urgent data. Security feeds showed that Palpatine was not alone in his office. A figure had approached him. The feed cut out moments later, jammed by an unknown signal. Yoda frowned deeply, focusing his mind to sense what the Force might reveal. In a swirl of clarity, Yoda felt it. A maelstrom of darkness emanating from the Chancellor's office, roiling like a black storm cloud. He turned to Mace, voice trembling. "Go, you must. Face him. Revealed, the Sith Lord is." Mace paused only to gather 3 of the best duelists among the masters present. They raced to the Chancellor's office, commandeering a swift transport. Meanwhile, Yoda remained behind, protecting the temple and Padme. The dark side pressed in on him, heavy and suffocating. At the office, Mace found the outer guards dead, red cloaks strewn across the floor. The door hissed open to reveal Palpatine standing calmly, a lightsaber hilt in his hand. The face that once offered benign smiles now twisted into a grin of pure malice. The masters ignited their sabers, tension suffocating the air. "So it was you?" Mace said, voice low and taut. "Darth Sidious." Palpatine's voice changed, a sinister rasp layered with cunning. "I've waited a long time for this. Your Jedi scheme is at an end. The Republic belongs to me." Lightning erupted from Palpatine's fingertips, searing the room with dark energy. The Jedi Masters sprang into action, deflecting the torrent with their blades. The corridor outside crackled with shattered glass as force pushes slammed into walls. Mace advanced, matching Palpatine blow for blow in a fierce lightsaber duel, while the other Masters attempted to flank him. Palpatine, unbelievably fast, wove between them, cutting down 2 Masters with savage precision. The dark side pulsed, fueling his attacks. Anakin, engaged in a frantic lightsaber duel with Grievous guards far above Coruscant, felt the shift in the Force like a knife to the heart. He staggered, pressing a hand to his temple. "Palpatine, he's the Sith Lord." The realization hit him like a thunderclap. The illusions fell away, leaving only the stark truth. The kindly mentor was the puppet master all along. Obi-Wan's eyes widened, sensing it too. "We have to finish here and get back." They struck swiftly, dispatching the remaining droids. Grievous fled deeper into the ship, but for once the Jedi let him go. Their priority was Coruscant, the Chancellor's office, the seat of darkness. They commandeered the ship's main hangar, launching in an escape pod, hoping to make planetfall quickly. Meanwhile, in the temple, Yoda gathered every ounce of his power to guard Padme. The Force churned with agonized confusion. The clones on Coruscant, following a new directive, began acting strangely, repositioning themselves around the temple. Then the dreaded words rang out through the temple comm. "Order 66. Mace fought Sidious in the office, his saber locked in a deadly dance with the Sith's crimson blade. He glimpsed a comm device on Sidious's desk issuing some coded command. In horror, Mace realized the clones across the galaxy were turning on the Jedi. Palpatine had planned this all along. Back at the temple, troopers started firing on unsuspecting Jedi. Screams and chaos erupted in the corridors. Yoda and a cadre of battle-ready knights shielded Padme, leading her through hidden passages to escape the onslaught. She clutched her belly, fear and adrenaline coursing through her, but she refused to slow them down. If the clones cut them off, all would be lost. Mace disarmed Sidious in a final, furious exchange, knocking the Sith's lightsaber away. Palpatine unleashed more lightning, howling with rage. Mace deflected it with supreme effort, inching closer. In the name of the Republic, you're under arrest. Sidious's eyes flared yellow. The Republic is mine. You cannot stop me. The lightning intensified, but Mace held his ground. Then, the office door hissed open again, and Anakin rushed in, breathless, Obi-Wan right behind him. They beheld the scene. Mace poised to kill or capture Palpatine, whose face was twisted and burned by his own reflected lightning. Anakin's mind spun, remembering the power Palpatine had spoken of, the power to save Padme. If Sidious died, would that knowledge die with him? Padme's life flashed before his eyes, her screaming in childbirth, the emptiness he felt in the visions. Yet, the Council had believed him, had tried to help him. They were so close to confronting the real threat. This was the moment he had dreaded, the crossroads. Mace sensed Anakin's inner turmoil. Anakin, help me. We have to end this. He controls the clones. They're killing Jedi. Sidious's voice dropped to a hiss. If you kill me, Padme will die. Only I can save her. Anakin's hands shook, his lightsaber unlit. Obi-Wan saw the torment on his friend's face. Anakin, the Council stands with you. Padme is in the temple with Yoda. Trust them. They're protecting her right now. Palpatine's voice turned desperate, pleading. They can't help you like I can. There are some powers only the dark side can teach. A memory of Mace and Yoda, of their unwavering support in these last weeks, rose in Anakin's mind. The warmth of Obi-Wan's friendship, the gentle acceptance of the Council, their extraordinary efforts to keep Padme safe. He saw them risk everything, trust him despite the Code's reservations. And now Sidious was revealed, the orchestrator of the war, the infiltration, the deception. If Anakin turned on the Jedi now, he might doom them all, including Padme, especially if Sidious betrayed him afterward. The vision from the Force flared. Padme dying, yes, but was that future or a path shaped by fear? Closing his eyes, he heard Obi-Wan's voice in his mind. We will uncover the threat. The Council has never been more united. That unity meant they would not let Padme die without doing everything possible. The old Anakin, trapped in fear, wanted to believe that only Sidious had the power. But the new Anakin, the one shaped by the Council's compassion, wanted to believe in the Jedi. With a sudden exhale, Anakin ignited his blade and lunged. Not at Mace, but at Palpatine. The Sith's eyes widened in shock, too consumed by his own lightning to fully defend. Anakin's strike landed, severing Sidious's hand at the wrist. Lightning sputtered out, and Sidious staggered, glaring at Anakin with pure hate. Mace seized the moment, using the Force to slam Sidious against the wall. The Sith's body crumpled. For a heartbeat, all was silent except for the rasp of labored breathing. Then Sidious let out a final, ragged hiss. You will all burn without me. Your precious senator doomed. Mace swiftly restrained him with Force bindings. Palpatine's face was a contorted mask of loathing. Obi-Wan knelt to pick up the lightsaber that had once been hidden in Palpatine's cloak, eyes full of sorrow at the betrayal of a once-admired leader. Anakin's chest heaved, tears stinging at the corners of his eyes. In that moment, he felt a wave of relief and terror all at once. We have to reach the temple. The clones. Mace nodded. I'll contact them to cease fire if I can. He gave the command. Perhaps we can override it now that he's captured. They swiftly tried to use the communications console. Palpatine, glaring through bloodshot eyes, spat. They obey only me, and soon, Lord Vader, they will carry out my last command. Anakin's breath caught at the name Vader, felt like a dark omen, but he pushed it aside. He forced Sidious to confirm the override codes under threat of losing his life. Weak, cornered, the Sith Lord eventually relented, punching in the command with his remaining hand. He attempted a final trick, suddenly summoning a surge of dark Force energy. But Mace and Obi-Wan together subdued him, ensuring no last burst of lightning would fell them. Across the city, clones paused in confusion as new orders filtered through their comms. Some continued to fire on Jedi out of pure momentum, but Jedi Knights fought fiercely back, now aware of the betrayal. A vicious battle erupted around the temple, But with Yoda's leadership and the Council's readiness, the clones' advantage of surprise diminished rapidly. Then Yoda felt the wave of relief through the Force. Sidious had been captured. The darkness that had loomed so near receded. He and the other masters rallied, pushing back the clone battalions who were uncertain whether to continue or stand down. The temple still suffered casualties. Many brave Jedi fell, but the betrayal was not as absolute as it might have been. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Mace escorted the wounded Sidious, his face twisted in hatred, down the corridors of the Senate to a secure cell, all while broadcasting to the galaxy that the Supreme Chancellor had been arrested for high treason. Chaos ignited in the Senate chambers. Some senators reeled in shock, others demanded proof. But the Jedi had no choice but to reveal what they could. Evidence of Palpatine's manipulations, the infiltration attempts, and the override codes for the clones' treacherous actions. A faction loyal to Palpatine, either out of fear or personal gain, tried to rally the Senate to call the Jedi coup illegal. But Padme, once she was escorted safely from the temple, stood before the Senate as a living testament. She recounted the infiltration attempts, the repeated threats on her life, the infiltration of the temple, the suspicious war maneuvers. With her eloquence and the Jedi's newfound transparency, the Senate began to splinter, but enough believed in the revelations that Palpatine was forced to stand trial. It was a slow process, as many found it difficult to accept that their beloved Chancellor was a hidden Sith. But Mace and Obi-Wan produced the red saber, the recordings of the confrontation, and the encryption codes for the clones. Sidious raged behind Force shields, trying to manipulate and charm even from within captivity. Anakin watched it all with a heavy heart, aware that a part of him once might have fallen for the Sith Lord's promises if not for the unwavering support of his fellow Jedi. Meanwhile, with the command structure faltering, the Separatist army began to withdraw from Coruscant. General Grievous fled, confused by the sudden shift in the war's momentum. The Jedi and the loyal clones regrouped, dismantling the elements of the droid offensive that remained. At the temple, the wounded were tended to, the bodies of the fallen honored. The atmosphere was heavy with loss, but also a sense of triumph in having exposed the dark heart of the Republic's leadership. Padme, safe at last, spent her days ensuring that the transitional government was established fairly. Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, and other respected senators helped form a provisional council to handle Palpatine's duties until a new chancellor could be elected. In time, the courts found the evidence against Palpatine overwhelming. Even the best legal minds could not refute the direct proof of him issuing the order for the clones to turn on the Jedi. The revelation of his Sith identity, complete with testimonies from multiple Jedi Masters, pushed the Senate to vote for immediate sentencing. Some still could not fathom how one man could orchestrate a galactic war so carefully, but the evidence stood. Palpatine was stripped of his office, indicted on charges of treason, war crimes, and conspiracy with the Separatists. He would be imprisoned in a maximum security facility, heavily guarded against any use of the Force. There was debate about whether the death penalty should be imposed, but the Jedi urged that the Republic must not revert to barbarism and that the Force would be better served by letting Palpatine face justice under Republic law. Plo Koon voiced a hope that, in captivity, the Sith Lord might one day choose redemption. Others were more skeptical, citing the monstrous crimes he had committed. Regardless, Palpatine's threat to the galaxy was, for the moment, neutralized. With the war's central puppet master unmasked, the Separatists found themselves in disarray. Some sectors chose to lay down arms, negotiating for peace. Others continued to fight sporadically, but without Sidious's grand plan, the impetus for total galactic domination waned. The Jedi, who suffered losses from the partial execution of Order 66, regrouped and used every resource to restore peace. In the midst of these galactic changes, Padme carried her pregnancy to term within the newly stabilized environment. She relocated to a safer complex in the Senate district, where Anakin stayed with her whenever he wasn't on a mission for the Jedi. The support of the Council never wavered. They had glimpsed the danger of ignoring a Jedi's genuine attachments and the catastrophic outcome that could have resulted. When the day finally came for Padme to give birth, she was rushed to a top medical facility in the Senate district. Anakin was at her side, hand clasping hers. This time, there was no lingering fear that the moment would be overshadowed by tragedy. He recalled all the warnings of his visions, but the future had shifted, shaped by the choices he and the council had made. The medical droids expertly helped Padme deliver twins, a boy and a girl. Tears streamed down Anakin's face as he held his son, Luke, wrapped in a soft blanket, and gazed at Padme cradling Leia. Padme, exhausted but elated, reached for Anakin's hand. Their eyes met, full of relief and love. That same day, Obi-Wan visited them in the med center, his typically stoic face wreathed in smiles. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "The Force is strong with them." Anakin looked to his old friend, a sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. They'll be raised in a galaxy free of Sidious's shadow. Meanwhile, Master Yoda arrived, leaning on his cane, ears perked with cautious optimism. "Gifted they are. Glad I am safe you both are. The future, unclouded now, perhaps." Mace Windu soon followed, a rare smile tugging at his usually serious face. "This is a day for celebration. The galaxy is still recovering. But in this moment, we have something truly precious." Padme, tears shining in her eyes, looked down at the tiny faces. "They'll grow up in a republic being rebuilt, one hopefully guided by the values of justice and peace." Anakin nodded. "With the Jedi and the Senate working together, I believe we can give them that future." Outside, the war still raged in pockets. The wounds inflicted by years of conflict would take a long time to heal. Many clones were uncertain of their place without Palpatine's commands. The Senate was still rife with political maneuvering. But the revelation of the Sith conspiracy had galvanized a renewed sense of unity among many worlds. And the Jedi, battered but not broken, walked a path of re-examination, pondering how to adapt their code to better support each other and the wider galaxy. Weeks later, the final holdouts of the Separatist alliance surrendered. General Grievous was tracked down and neutralized by Master Shaak Ti and a contingent of knights on Utapau. The commerce guilds capitulated, mindful of the new leadership in the Senate. A wave of disarmament treaties spread across the Outer Rim. Some welcomed the peace, others harbored resentment, but the large-scale conflict drew to a close. In that aftermath, the Jedi Council convened once more in their circular chamber. Anakin stood before them, holding infant Luke in his arms, while Obi-Wan held Leia. Padme stood to the side, respectfully observing. Mace Windu spoke first, in a measured tone that carried profound emotion. "Anakin Skywalker, you have walked a difficult path. Your visions drove you to us, and together we have averted what might have been a galaxy-wide cataclysm. The Force, it seems, has guided us toward a new era." Yoda nodded slowly. "Doubted you we have in the past, yet proved your worth you did. And our openness to your counsel, crucial it was. A learning experience for us all." A hush fell as Obi-Wan gently passed Leia to Padme and turned to Anakin. "The Council wishes to recognize you for your service and your role in ending this war." Ki-Adi-Mundi rose from his seat. "You, Anakin Skywalker, showed us that the prophecy of the Chosen One may be more than a linear path of destruction of the Sith. It may also be about cooperation, about bridging gaps in our own Jedi ways. Through unity we found strength. Through acknowledging your vision, we discovered the hidden enemy." Mace made a rare smile as he spoke the final words. "We humbly acknowledge your steadfast dedication, not just to the Jedi, but to the Republic and to the ones you love. The dark side thrives on secrecy and division. Today, we reaffirm that the Jedi stand with one another, with open minds and open hearts." Anakin bowed his head, tears threatening to fall. He remembered the day he stood in this chamber as a child, suspect in their eyes. Now they treated him with respect, gratitude, and acceptance. The war had been cruel and they had lost much. But in facing his visions head-on, they had changed the future. In the weeks that followed, the new chancellor, a respected senator known for her fairness, began the arduous task of reform. She, alongside Padme, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma, championed efforts to dismantle the militaristic structures put in place by Palpatine. The clones who remained were given honorable service roles or permitted to settle in planetary communities that welcomed them, though the process was complex and fraught with ethical considerations. The Jedi worked with the Senate to help maintain peace, vowing not to retake the role of generals, but to fulfill their original purpose as keepers of the peace and guardians of justice. Sidious, under heavy guard in a force-dampening cell, never ceased trying to manipulate those around him. But the revelations of his crimes and the Jedi's vigilance ensured he stayed isolated. Rumors spread that he was slowly losing his mind, ranting about the might-have-beens and cursing the name Skywalker. Some believed he was plotting an escape, but no sign of it emerged. Over time, the Senate debated if a secure exile was best for him, or if a trial with a life sentence was more appropriate. But the immediate threat was contained. As for Anakin, he divided his days between fatherhood, watching his children grow, and participating in the Jedi's reconstruction. Padme resumed her full senatorial duties once she recovered from childbirth, championing anti-corruption bills and bridging the divides the war had created. Their relationship, once hidden, was now an open secret. The Council, recognizing the validity of their bond, did not demand separation. Instead, they quietly amended their stance on Jedi attachments, allowing that love, when approached with honesty and balance, did not necessarily lead to the dark side. It was fear, secrecy, and obsession that threatened a Jedi's path, not genuine compassion. This new perspective rippled through the Order, with younger generations of Jedi feeling a renewed sense of connection to the galaxy they served. While many older masters remained cautious, the presence of the twins in the temple, often cooed over by older Padawans and knights, served as a living reminder that the Force was indeed about life, not merely rules. Over the following year, peace treaties solidified. The Republic, though scarred, began to heal. Many clone units were demobilized, and the remains of the Separatist army were decommissioned. The galaxy at large exhaled a collective sigh of relief, though rebuilding efforts would take time. On the day the final treaty was signed, there was a ceremony in the Senate rotunda. Padme stood at the podium, infant Leia in her arms, with Luke napping soundly in Anakin's. Obi-Wan, Mace, and Yoda sat in the honored gallery, joined by thousands of senators and delegates. The air resonated with hope as Padme spoke of unity, reconstruction, and the lessons learned from the revelation of a hidden evil at the Republic's core. When she finished, the applause thundered through the chamber. Anakin felt a swell of emotion as he glanced at Obi-Wan, remembering the battles fought side by side. He looked to Mace and Yoda, recalling the day they decided to trust his visions. He looked down at Luke in his arms, at Leia in Padme's, and felt an overwhelming gratitude that the horrors he once foresaw had been averted. There had been losses, sacrifices, heartbreak, but they had done it together. Afterward, in a quieter moment, Anakin walked with Obi-Wan through the grand concourse. The older Jedi's expression was peaceful. "We've come a long way since you were that 9-year-old boy on Tatooine, Anakin." Anakin chuckled softly. "Sometimes I still feel like that boy, uncertain of my place in the galaxy." Obi-Wan's eyes twinkled. "Well, I'd say you've more than found your place. You helped save the Jedi Order, the Republic, and your family." Anakin paused, letting that sink in. "I couldn't have done it without you, or the Council, or Padme." Everyone played a part. They reached a wide window overlooking Coruscant, the city lights now glowing in peaceful harmony rather than ominous threat. "Yes, everyone played a part," Obi-Wan repeated softly. "Perhaps that is how we prevail, by standing together." Anakin nodded, a faint smile curling his lips. "I think I finally understand that now." Behind them, the echoes of the Senate celebration drifted through the halls. The galaxy still faced challenges, regional conflicts, distrust, the daunting task of reform. But for the first time in what felt like ages, there was hope, genuine and bright. The dark side had been unmasked, contained. The Jedi, tempered by this trial, stood ready to guide the Republic toward a more balanced future. And so, in that grand tapestry of events, Anakin's choice to trust the Council from the start changed everything. A future once drowned in darkness and sorrow was rewritten, replaced by a fragile but enduring peace. And in Anakin's heart, he felt at last the gentle assurance of the living Force, unburdened by the chains of fear. Padme lived, Luke and Leia were safe, and the path ahead, while uncertain, was no longer shrouded by the illusions of the Sith. He gazed at Coruscant's endless horizon one last time before rejoining his family, feeling the Force move through him like a warm current. The Chosen One, the Council, the Senate, and countless beings across the galaxy had taken a leap of faith together. In doing so, they had not merely averted a nightmare, but set a new precedent for cooperation and compassion. In the hush of that moment, Anakin smiled, the thunder of applause still echoing in his ears, and whispered under his breath, "May the Force be with us, always."